Is it there? All right, friends, welcome once again to our latest episode number 3 of Talking Smack with Bob and Jack. It's going to be pure Uh-oh, we can't hear that. Yeah, that's coming right back out of my computer here, and we have to make that go away. Yeah, and that's not going to work. It's always something. It is always something. All right, welcome to Talking Smack with Bob and Jack. It is political smack. It is the aftermath. We did a show, Jack, on Monday. It was the preview of the midterm elections. Today we planned on doing the review of the midterm elections, and right now we all thought we'd be talking about a great big conservative red wave. It did not happen. And Jack, I want to summarize my feelings on what happened last night with this clip.
Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Now, if you know what you're worth, now go out and get what you're worth. But you gotta be willing to take the hits. And not pointing fingers saying you ain't where you want to be because of him or her or anybody. Cowards do that, and that ain't you. You're better than that.
Monologue as part of a dialogue in the movie Rocky Balboa, which was the first one after the Rocky series, after Rocky V, Rocky Balboa. That was like in 2006, I think that came out. I have drawn so much inspiration from that through the years. I made that. I broke it up. I put it into segments. I put the music behind it and everything else because there was no music when it actually ran in the film. And I used that to fire me up and to pick me up and to remind me of a few certain things at a time when I think I need to be reminded of that, okay? Jack, that's what happened last night. We took some hits. There's no question about it. We took some hits. I've been using boxing metaphors all day long, and I thought earlier this afternoon that I would bring this up on the podcast tonight. We took some hits. There's no question about that. But as he said, as he was talking to his son, who was complaining about not being, as successful as he wants to be because he feels like his dad's, reputation holds him back or whatever. But the bottom line is, he said, it's not about how hard you can get hit or how hard you can hit. It's how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. We got hit last night many times. There were races. We got hit in Pennsylvania with John Fetterman, a Frankenstein monster who is an absolute living, breathing idiot. We got hit in Michigan with Gretchen Whitmer, in New York with Kathy Hochul. We took hits with Illinois still being run by J.B. Pritzker. Are you kidding me? We took hits in a lot of places. We took hits in the fact that we're not going to have a 25 or 35 seat majority in the House. We're not going to have a 3, 4, or 5 seat majority in the Senate. It didn't happen the way we wanted to. But the question is the fact that we took some hits, are we going to sit on the stool in the corner and say, done? Or are you ready to fight the next round? Because, Jack, we didn't get knocked out, and we didn't knock them out. You know what happened last night? Another round happened. Mm-hmm. Another round in the fight for the soul of this country. Quite literally, that's what this is. Another round happened is all. We thought it would be a big round for us. We thought we might get a knockdown. We thought we might get a 10-8 round, in boxing scoring, if anybody knows what that means. We thought we might get a 10-8 round and it would really propel us to a victory in the bigger, scheme of things. But we didn't. But we also didn't get knocked down. We also didn't, we took some shots, and the question is can you keep moving forward? That's how winning is done. As Rocky says in that speech that I just found just so inspirational, can we keep moving forward? And I said to you on the radio this morning, and I'll say it again now on Talking Smack, I'm bouncing, man. I'm bouncing in the middle of the ring waiting for the next bell to ring. Let's freaking go. I'm not done. I'm not beaten. The fact is, we are in a much better position now than we were yesterday at this time. Why? Because yesterday at this time, they still had the majorities in both houses of Congress, by way of the tiebreaker, obviously, in the Senate. But they still had it. And now, I don't care if it's a slim majority of 2 or 1 vote. I don't care if it's 219. I don't care if it's 218 to 217. We have a chance to be the brake and slam on the brake pedal to stop all of the radical crap that has been done to us in the last 2 years by unchecked, unfettered Democrat power. That's a great thing. I'm ready to continue the fight. It's not over. We didn't crush them. We didn't red wave them. They didn't do anything to us either. Another round happened last night, and why people are walking around and sulking right now is very disappointing. It's very, very aggravating because there's no reason for us to be this upset. There's no reason for us to be this, whoa. What did you think? Did people think we were going to win the entire war in one night's voting? Stop it. Last night, some good things happened, some not so good things happened, and some things that have yet to be determined happened as well. I am in the middle of the ring, and I'm bouncing, and I'm ready to float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. Bring it the hell on, because that's how we should approach this thing. Can we keep moving forward? Get behind me, because I'm damn sure moving forward. That's all I got. Talk some smack.
End of Act 1. Super fantastic. Bob, we chatted this morning on the radio, and you talked a little bit about last night, and you used the boxing analogy. What you didn't know was that I was sitting outside in my car waiting for my 9-year-old daughter to come out of her orthodontist appointment. And about halfway through that call, she came bebopping out the door. Right about the time you were saying some of the things that you were just saying, obviously you were more animated, more in-depth and detailed here. But that was really refreshing for me. I'm not sulking, but I look at her and I go, yeah, ring the bell. Let's go. Round 2, round 3, round 4, round 12, round 15, 4 overtimes in football, whatever it takes. And there are some soft people, and soft people usually want to end it in the first quarter. They want the game to be determined in the first 12 minutes because they get nervous. They don't like to have to hang on. They don't like to have to gut it out. Well, here's the bad news. In this country, for about 100 years, the government, it's been the camel's nose under the tent, and the full camels in the tent, and about 12 of the camel's friends are in the tent, and we're getting crowded out, and we're getting blamed for it. And you're not going to win that overnight. Champions don't do that. In fact, think of some of the great football programs and the great coaches that have come through. And they are programmed to say, and their players are programmed to say, we won tonight and we're going to celebrate tonight. And then tomorrow, we go back to work. Yeah, we took one on the chin tonight, but guess what? The train doesn't stop. We're paused at the station and we're moving on, and we're going to come back next week. We're going to play like champions. You know, we really need to toughen up. We really need to get outside of the world that we've created for ourselves with microwave dinners and, you know, everything at our fingertips with social media. This is a heavyweight championship. And you were created for a time such as this. And if you can't go 12 rounds, shut the hell up. Because we're going to have to go 12 rounds. We won the round last night, actually, in the state of Ohio. We won big time.
Oh, we had a red wave?
Conservative. Red wave. Now, I'm going to kvetch about a couple of things where I think we took our eyes off the ball, and I think we did it intentionally, and I think people need to understand what's at stake. Because we missed a big one in Ohio last night, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But look, Republicans are going to control the House. What does that mean? It means that you can put a person in charge of the committees. It means that your budget flips from 33% to 66%. And look, I think Americans are tired and worn out. All this infighting and, you know, bringing people in and letting them sit in front of the cameras and pounding on the desk. Well, you answer But look, I'm telling you, there are some Americans who are not done with the FBI. They're not done with the Department of Justice. They're not done with Anthony Fauci. So I expect that there are going to be some hearings. But they can stop the hemorrhaging. They can stop the bleeding on some of this completely reckless spending. Now, I think it's 49-48 right now in the Senate. It might end up 51-49, maybe. But at least, you know, Jim Jordan, I heard him talk about a year ago, and he said, I mean, he was a little bit he was a little bit down. I'll say down. He's very pragmatic then, and he said, "Look, I think the best we can do in the midterms is like slow the train down, and then we got to get our guy back in the White House in 2024."
Which we have to talk about as well tonight.
We will talk about
that factor.
You know, it's a win, and you got one of two choices, right? There's this old saying, and I'm going to butcher it, but I'm going to try it anyway. So, you know, you're out in the Serengeti, maybe on the savannah, and if you're the lion, you wake up in the morning and you've got to run faster than the slowest gazelle, right? And if you're the gazelle, you got to get up in the morning and run away from the lion. But regardless, come morning, you better be running. And so, what are your choices? You can, you know, act like a 2-year-old and sit in your poopy diaper and do nothing, or you can be an adult. You can man up, you can woman up, you can go do what needs to get done. And I think that's where we'll be. A lot of times we have a fear of the unknown. So I think once we understand what it's going to look like in the U.S. House, whether we have an advantage or not in the Senate, it looks like McCarthy's probably going to be Speaker in the House, I would assume. I think once there is clarity about where we are, I think that will alleviate some of that anxiety. But, you know, you take your win and let's go.
Yeah, you know, I think we mixed all of our sports metaphors in there. You said taking your eye off the ball, so we're in baseball. You did the football thing. I was doing the boxing thing, so we're mixing it all up. But since you did the football thing, I'll put it this way. Sometimes you win a game 35-10, and you look great. You have great offense and you have great defense, and you leave that game, like you said, celebrating that night very heartily and happily, but knowing you have to go back to work the next day. Sometimes you win a game 9-6. Sometimes you can't cash in on the red zone. Sometimes you cannot just get your offense moving, and you have a bunch of turnovers, but the other guy does too. And it's a very narrow win. And you know what? 9-6 counts in the standings the same way 35-10 does. It's a win, and you move forward to the next game. Well, in my Rocky analogy and my boxing analogy, we won a round. We won around 10-9, so it wasn't 10-8 with a knockdown. We won around 10-9. Let's regroup and get ready for the next round. And let's, like I said, come out swinging. And that's exactly what I want to do. And I think all of those analogies work. So there's a lot. I'm still having issues with reading the comments on Facebook. But do you have yours up, Jack? Because I know we've been dealing with this for the first 3 episodes here. They're not working for you either at the moment.
No, I think we're good.
Okay, we are.
Yeah, we're good.
Jack and I can go in a million different directions on what happened yesterday and where we go from here. we would like to see a little bit of guidance from you. What do you want to know? What do you want us? What do you want to ask us? What do you want to say to us and get us to respond to? If you can, on the Facebook live stream right now, go to the comments and you've got something to ask or say, do it, and we will respond to it. But we have some things we want to say and places we want to go, but we want to give you the answers to the questions you have. A lot of people have questions, Jack, and to the extent that we can answer them, we should.
Yeah. So Patty Klein asks a good question. Do you think Republicans are ready to stop dividing and hurting themselves? I guess you could read into that a couple of ways. I had a conversation actually on the way into the studio today, and that was one of the things. Bob, I want you to weigh in on that one first. I have a couple of things to add, but do you think Republicans are ready to stop dividing and hurting themselves?
Well, that is such a loaded question, and that is such a difficult notion to accept.
Yeah.
The Republicans are never going to be Democrats, where they're all slaves to groupthink. We're not all going to think the same way, and regardless of what our real opinion is, we're going to say, okay, we agree with this other, Democrat the way that they do for the purposes of party unity. Now, it works for them, and they win some elections because of that, and sometimes I think we should unify more, and we should find a way to coalesce around people and individuals, even if they're not perfect. I think we did that with Donald Trump. I think it's the reason Donald Trump got his term. I think that's why he won. There were people who hated him in the primaries in 2016. I was one of them. I was all for Ted Cruz. I was all for a whole bunch of people instead of Donald Trump. I've covered this ground before. But when it came time to win, we had to beat Hillary Clinton. The Republican Party circled the wagons and unified behind this guy, even though he still had, there was the establishment, there was the swamp, there was the Democrats. They did the Russia collusion hoax. They did all of that crap to him. But the party, generally speaking, we have a lot of independent thinkers. And the left doesn't like that. So when you say, will we stop dividing one another and hurting one another, does that mean we're going to stop thinking independently? Look, the bottom line is, a Ron DeSantis thinks a lot differently than a Liz Cheney. And I know Liz Cheney just renounced her Republicanship, if you will, Republicanism. But there are people who think a lot differently. Jim Jordan is a lot different than Dave Joyce. They're both Republican members of Congress, but they see things very, very differently. So does that mean they're hurting each other because one isn't as conservative as the other? They don't see eye to eye. So I don't like the premise that we're always divided and hurting one another because we have different ideas and different ways of trying to solve the same problems. I like that about us. We don't engage in groupthink. But having said that, we all needed to be rowing our boat in the same directions going into the midterms yesterday, and we need to be doing that going into 2024 behind whoever is going to be the nominee for president. And in that regard, we cannot be divided. We cannot allow divisive figures to lead the party. And I think you know where I'm going with that.
Well,
so
yeah. Do you want me to spoiler alert, or just spoil it right now? I think what you're saying is Donald Trump is radioactive. That's what I think you're saying, is that going into 2024, I think he's going to make an announcement next week, and I think some people are going to be very happy about that. I think some people are going to be extremely concerned about that, and the number one reason I think they're going to be concerned about it is that some people would argue that Donald Trump did the branding and the marketing and made the MAGA movement that you hear about in mainstream media.
He did.
And that is, the attack target of the left. But the principles that he's talking about, that was here before him. But the way that he packaged it, make America great again, that's his, and he owns that.
But Jack, what he did the part about making America great again and America first, yeah, it existed before him, but people were afraid to say it. There's a globalist movement, there is an internationalist movement, and he came out and said, I want to be the president of Pittsburgh, not Paris. My job is to the people here, America first, make America great again, then worry about it. And nobody else wanted to say those things because you're going to get called, you're going to get called not a transphobe. What am I trying to say?
A bigot.
No, well, yeah,
a misogynist.
but that's not the word I'm looking for. Gosh.
A white nationalist.
No, that too. They called him that too. Why can't I not think of the word? But the point is, everybody was afraid to say it. He came out and said it out loud,
And
that was what that unified people behind him.
And that's where some of his magnetism comes from. Is he has the ability to stand up and say whatever the hell's on his mind, and the weight of what he's going to say, you have to carry it. And if you can't carry it and it crushes you, he looks at you and says, "Well, too bad. That's on you. That's not a Donald Trump
right.
problem. That's a you problem." And I think that's what's magnetic about him. What I'm saying is, there was a level of patriotism. There was a level of America first.
Xenophobe, by the way. That's
Xenophobe.
what I've been trying to think of, and I don't know why I blanked on it. Xenophobe, as far as people from other countries.
And it's not a mystery why blue collar workers rallied around Donald Trump. I mean, I come from a family that was blue collar, in the union, and they preached America first. They wanted you to buy American made products. So, those things were here. He brought some of them together. But the whole point is, there are people who are concerned. The analogy I use, if you remember back in the day, and I'm dating myself a little bit here, but there used to be a program on, for the life of me, I can't remember the name of it right now, but it was like this hidden camera, candid camera, maybe. So there was a candid camera episode on. I remember watching it, and I think it was actually based on some sort of psychological study or theory. And this guy walks into an elevator, and everybody's facing the opposite way.
Yeah.
And it's so uncomfortably painful and comedic. You're like, he can't, and you can just see him warring, like, do I turn? That's what it's like, I think, for some Republicans with Donald Trump, is that the world is against you, and it doesn't matter if it's the school board, the neighbor, the mainstream narrative. And I think that to some people is too much to bear after COVID,
right,
and after what we've been through as a country, as a collective. And so that being said, I think some people think that Donald Trump is radioactive, number one, because everybody's turned against him, and it puts a person in that situation where, like, they literally have to fight their biological hardwiring to stand firm, which is hard to do. And then the other piece is, can Republicans afford to knock down, drag out,
no,
expensive primary in 24? They can't.
No.
And I think if Ron DeSantis runs, I think he's unbeatable.
Against the Democrats.
Against the Democrats.
But if he runs against Donald Trump, he is very, very much beatable.
Very
and
beatable.
That's the real problem here. Last night was not a good night for Donald Trump. Donald Trump last night had his brand hurt big time in two ways. Number one, many of his endorsed candidates lost to very vulnerable Democrats at a time when inflation was 9%, I think 8.2% as we went into things last night. We have record high gas prices, or at least decades high gas prices. We have record high grocery prices. We have an invisible border. We have crime on the rise. We have all of these things that literally affect people's daily lives in horrible ways, and all of them are Democrat driven. All of their policies, all of their platform is responsible for it, and we couldn't get Donald Trump's hand-picked, personal, capital letter, complete, capital letter, and total, capital letter endorsement. We can't get those people to beat the Democrats in this environment.
Well,
that's toxic. Hold on, and then let me. The second part. On that. The second part was the Ron DeSantis night. Ron DeSantis beat Charlie Crist by like 170 points. And I know it was more like 19, but do you know how enormous that is? He won Miami-Dade County, which hasn't been won by a Republican in some 40 years. He turned Cuban Americans Republican. It is such a red state now. It's no longer a swing state. It's no longer a purple state. Florida's red in almost exclusively because of Ron DeSantis, which harms the Trump brand, and he knows it, which is why he wouldn't even talk about him last night.
I'm gonna push back on you there, Bob. First of all, I don't think that it is entirely Donald Trump's fault.
Didn't say it was his fault. Said that his endorsed candidates lost, a lot of them.
Some of them did lose, and some
Didn't
of them won. And I'm going to go to J.R. Majewski has weighed in. We're going to go to his comment in a second because I think there's a point there that needs to be made. But look, Ron DeSantis has been the benefactor of Americans from all around the country going to Florida, the way that he handled COVID, the way that he has upheld the Constitution of the United States and Florida's, founding documents, that has been a magnet for people to go to Florida. So, they show up.
Half the
Is it-
population in New York moved to Florida because of Ron
well,
DeSantis.
and I think Hochul probably benefited from that, and I think DeSantis benefited from it, right? So they both benefited from Ron DeSantis. Isn't that interesting? But here's the other point: did he turn Cubans and Venezuelans Republican? I don't know. I think those people inherently they leave communist regimes to come here, and I think that they look at it and go, "No, I'm going to vote for this guy because I know what this leads to. I came from it." So,
But for 40 years, Jack, in Miami-Dade County, which is so overwhelmingly Latino and Cuban American, those Cuban American voters have not voted for Republicans until Ron DeSantis.
well, I would argue that that entire people group is going to be a very, very strong group for Republicans going forward, and I think that scares the hell out of Democrats, and it should.
I want to share something with you about this part of the conversation, and it's not going to be all about Donald Trump because that's what Donald Trump wants it to be, is all about Donald Trump. But this is important. I have a friend who was handing out slate cards outside of a precinct in her home precinct last night. And so she was talking to a strong conservative Republican volunteer. And she was talking to the people on the way in and listening to them as they came out. And this is what she sent me today. Quote, what she first said was in response to my Facebook post that said very simply, conservative patriots, it's time to move on. And you can read into that what you want. But yes, I am talking about moving on from the Trump party. It's got to come back to the conservative party, and this 76-year-old man, who will be 78 when he runs in 2020, or if he wins in 2024, cannot continue to be the standard bearer, was my point.
It's got to be about the movement and not the man.
Not the man, bingo.
And,
I'm behind. And I credit him for the movement. I credit him for everything that he came up with and did. And that's what makes it hard to say, I want to move on with the movement without the man. But the man drags the movement down now instead of pushing it down the line further. And that's a big part of this.
Maybe. And I'm going to push back on that. We had a little conversation before we went live tonight. And I'm not going to put all that on the table because it's unnecessary. But the part that what I think I was trying to convey when we were talking earlier, Bob, and to bring the audience into the fold, we were talking about, well, what is the watermark in Ohio and above and below and da-da-da-da-da. The bottom line is this. There are candidates like J.R. Majewski. There are candidates like Madison. She lost. J.R. lost. You would argue that Madison's race might have been a little more winnable. I think J.R.'s race was absolutely in play.
I never saw that. And it's not because of J.R. I interviewed J.R. I like J.R. And I did not like the kind of campaign that she ran against him. But she's been in, Marcy Kaptur's been in D.C. for 100 years. Mm-hmm. She's so
name
entrenched.
recognition.
It's very, very hard to beat somebody
Yep.
like that.
Yep.
And like I said, that's not J.R. Majewski's fault. It's not anybody's fault.
Well,
it's just the reality of it. I think that would be one of the upsets of a decade or more to beat a Marcy Kaptur, particularly if you are not a seasoned politician.
Well, I think that's why it matters. I think that's why party leadership matters. I know that J.R. Majewski lost money down the stretch when Marcy Kaptur pulled her. This is the second time, by the way, she's done this. My understanding is she was on the ropes once before and brought into question her opponent's, military service record. Well,
right.
she did the same thing.
Yep.
And then the party pulled funding from Majewski, and I think that was a mistake. I think that could have been a winnable race. Now, with Gilbert, I think she's a rising. I'd be interested to see if JR runs again. I think Madison, Jesiato Gilbert will run again. I think she's a rising star.
In her concession, she basically said it. This is not
how
over.
much, and please don't get mad at me. I can hear the text bell ringing before I even say this. How much of that, because that was a close race, maybe 5. How much of that do you think was, she did have to stop campaigning there at the end a little bit, right? She had to slow down, which is fantastic, right? Mom first. Do you think that had an impact on those final numbers?
Maybe.
Or do you think it's that her opponent has tremendous name recognition?
Well, not
on the
tremendous, but just decent name recognition in a very Democrat district. Remember, it was Tim Ryan's district is the reason that was open. And yes, it was redrawn a little bit, so there was a better chance for her. I think she had a better chance. That's why it was closer. But I think I think there were a number of reasons why Madison did not win, but I thought she had a chance to. And like you said, it was much closer than the one JR had with Marcy Kaptur, because JR is climbing a mountain and he's carrying a bag of bricks on his back. That's just in general against running against Marcy Kaptur. And when she pulled her BS, attack on his military record, like you pointed out,
Which was a lie.
it was a lie. But it worked because you're right. The Republicans pulled funding. They said, well, he's done.
And his district
And they
was
abandoned
R3.
it.
His district was
Yeah.
R3.
Right. So that's why
that was a
that's why it
winnable
was-
race.
it was-
So that goes up to the party leadership in my mind.
So let me get back to the point that I was making, to getting back to the leadership of the party thing. So my friend who is a volunteer and passing out slate cards to people on the way, and said, so glad, she texted me, said, so glad to see you moving on, meaning from Trump. And I said, until he wins the nomination, and then we will all jump behind him again. And that's a fact. I'll say that right now, and I've said it on my radio program. If he becomes the nominee for the Republican Party again, and it's Donald Trump v. Joe Biden round 2, or Donald Trump v. Pete Buttigieg, or Kamala Harris, or Gavin Newsom, or anybody else, I will do everything I can to get Donald Trump elected, and I will march behind him every step of the way. But I don't think we can afford to make it come to that. So she responded to me, he can't win. Big donors are moving away from him, and I'm guessing exit polling will show that women marched up to the voting booth in defiance of his big announcement, of his next big announcement. Remember what you were saying about strategy
Right.
on Monday? We
And
had
you
this
said it would
debate,
backfire.
and I said it's going to backfire. It's going to drive Democrats there, not Republicans. Republicans were already coming.
I don't buy
but
it.
It's going to drive Democrats there.
I don't buy it.
You can't deny people what they're saying. She said, that's what I heard from women last night. He stirred the effing pot. The Democrat handing out the slates last night, because there was a Democrat near her where she handed out the Republicans, the Democrat handing out their slates last night said Trump did them a big favor on election eve. And I said, wow, that's really important to know. She went on to say, I also had Republican voters tell me they were voting straight Republican except for Vance because he didn't support Ukraine. And in this community, I can understand because there's a strong Ukrainian, community here. But of course, that
I don't
didn't
think-
matter
I-
because JD won.
I wouldn't go as far as saying that he didn't support Ukraine. I think he was making a point about where we stick our nose in what we do. I think that was his point.
Well, that's code for he doesn't support sending all of the money we're sending there. Period. That's reality. He's criticized and condemned it, and I condemn a lot of that too. I'm not saying we should do nothing and let Putin run wild, but he has criticized the funding. Anyway, she said, then the groups of young people started coming up. 2, 3, 4, 5, even 6 at a time. None of them even wanted the Republican slate. Some of them just glared at me, and I heard one say, I'm voting through the prism of women's rights tonight, LOL. Or I'm sorry, that was her LOL. I just did a Biden reading the teleprompter.
And the quote,
and I
repeat
said,
the line.
Right. And I said, except for preborn women, it would seem. And she said, sure, it's a small sample of voters, but it kind of explains the lack of a wave. Most people didn't vote Biden because they didn't vote for Biden because they wanted him. They voted because they did not want Trump, talking about the 2020 election. And then the last one was many opportunities to listen to what people were saying on their way in and their way out. And to me and to the Democrats standing a little way from me handing out their dumb slate cards.
And this is Cuyahoga County?
This is Cuyahoga County. This is Broadview Heights, actually, to be precise. So I find, because you said the abortion thing had a lot bigger role, and I agreed, and she just confirmed that, again, with the line about we're here to vote for women's rights. They don't care about the fact that their grocery cart is empty and that their gas tank is empty and they can't afford to fill either one of those things up. The abortion issue mattered to a lot of them. And then the other one was, as she pointed out, the Trump, I'm making a big announcement next week, he says that the night before, drove them there against him and against them. And that's what I was afraid would happen. And at least by that small anecdotal precinct discussion, that's kind of happening. What happened?
Yeah, so, on the abortion issue, I had a really good conversation with Mike Gibbons, actually. And, I haven't really looked in as closely as I would have liked to or should have with other Republicans who ran in that primary against J.D. Vance. And if I remember correctly, all of them said that they would at least, support him out in front, verbally endorse, maybe some of them financially. I think Mike Gibbons walked the talk there. He did do a lot behind the scenes. I'm starting to realize and understand. But we had a nice conversation.
That man's
he
a
said
patriot's
something.
patriot, and I want to underscore that. He really is. Mike Gibbons did not run for personal glory, power, or anything else. He wants to help the country, and if he wasn't going to win it, he wants to help J.D. Vance help the country. He is a patriot's patriot, so I just wanted to say that.
Well, he brought up a really good point, and he said, the messaging on, and we've talked about this a little bit on your radio show before, the messaging on abortion got away from Republicans a little bit, and I would agree with that. First of all, mainstream media is not going to do you any favors. They're not going to talk about what the Supreme Court really said, and what the Supreme Court really said is that, because what you heard, if you turned on MSNBC and CNN and all these other stations, is that abortion is now illegal, right? In essence, that's what they were saying.
Right.
No, it's not. They're saying that it is not, under the Constitution, a human right protected by the U.S. Constitution. It's a states' rights issue. And so, particularly in those Senate races, every single one of those candidates was asked about abortion, and the Supreme Court weighed in, correct?
Yeah.
And so, the messaging and the answer is that's a states' right issue. That's an issue that you need to take to your state
legislators.
executive officers
Right.
and your state House of Reps people and your state senators, and you need to decide that there. Hard stop. That's it.
That's it.
And but they got wrapped around the axle after being called into that question, and I think it hurt them, and because it's really hard to have. Look, I think in Ohio people feel differently about abortion on average than people in California and New York, and I think J.D. Vance did a really good job of actually explaining that during the Fox News town hall. But the messaging there, I think, got away from them, and I think it did cost them a little bit because the Supreme Court didn't say it was about women's rights. The Supreme Court said it was about the Constitution and the state. If you want to talk about democracy, you actually have more right now because you have more control over who's in your state house than you do what the Supreme Court may or may not decide on that case.
Which is exactly the way it's supposed to be, and that's what they literally put it in the hands of the people. So those are some of the important things. But bigger picture here before, and I want to go back, or I want you to go to the comments because again I don't have them, although I am getting some from our technical whiz over there, Bruce, who is sending some of them to me via text here. So that's good. I do want to get some of those, but just super quick. While we're talking about the breakdown of the 10-9 round, which again, I want people to see that it was a win last night. Republicans shouldn't be crying tonight. We won. We're going to win the House. It's going to be by a slimmer majority than we wanted. But like I said, sometimes that's what you do, and now you get ready for the next round. But in some of the states, we had the knockout, and this was one of them, as we pointed out. In Florida, it was one of them, as we pointed out. There were some amazing things that happened last night, and there are still some things, though, that we don't know what the results are going to be. There's going to be a runoff in Georgia. And in Arizona, they're going to count for the next 3 months, it seems like, before they decide whether or not there was more cheating going on and whether or not Kari Lake is going to be able to be the governor and Blake Masters is going to be the new senator. There's still a lot of questions that we don't have answered from last night, Jack. And that's, I think it's a little bit premature for people to, again, be either celebrating and dancing in the streets or wallowing in the depths of despair because we still don't know what the final totals are going to be in either place.
No. And I want to point out one other thing regarding that Pennsylvania race.
Yeah.
Fetterman won by 2.5, 3-ish, somewhere in that ballpark.
I thought it was more like 5.
Was it 5?
Well, maybe that was yesterday, but not by and that was with 75% in or whatever. Maybe it changed.
So, regardless, it's the old euchre term, right? A card laid is a card played, and their debate was really late. I'm wondering how many people made up their minds
2.5 million
and wrote in John Fetterman before seeing that debate.
2.5 million people, they said, voted early in Pennsylvania before the debate. 2.5 million. That's
how many
a
of them,
huge number.
How many of those folks are like, oh my gosh, I led with the right Bauer, let me pull that back, I didn't mean to do that? How many folks do you think regret it?
But you know what, Jack, and I said this to you on the radio today when we talked about this. It's not just the fact that when you see him on a stage, unable to read and comprehend what he's reading, listen and comprehend what he's hearing, process those things in his head, and then respond to them effectively. It's about much, much more than that. I want to know how Pennsylvanians can get behind a guy who is anti-fracking in a completely, natural resource producing state for crying out loud. Coal mining and natural gas, a huge part of what Pennsylvania is, and he's an anti-fracker. He lied in that debate by saying I'm pro-fracking. Martha McCallum, was it not Martha McCallum? Whoever the questioner was said, but sir, you just said you're anti-fracking. You don't want any more fracking. And he had to sit there and stumble through 10 seconds of eventually saying, I'm pro-fracking. He's a liar. And most importantly, which I said on the radio today, and I hate sounding redundant on this, but I can't understand in a country and in a state, particularly in Philadelphia, where violent crime is like it is in New York City and Chicago and St. Louis and Cleveland. It's on a huge spike, and this guy's, prior to his stroke, messaging was, we've got to get the murderers out of prison. I want to empty the prisons. He said we can release 1/3 of the prisoners in Pennsylvania and not be any less safe for it. Now, he's not talking about weed smokers. He's talking about violent murderers, because he was asked, if you could wave your magic wand and fix one thing, what would you do? He didn't say cure cancer or childhood diseases or anything, erase taxes for all Americans. He didn't say anything. He said, end life in prison without parole for Pennsylvania. Who is in prison for life without parole? The worst of the worst murderers. Nobody else. Nobody else. And he wants them to get out and go home, and then compared them and said, you got all these Republicans think that all the murderers who are in prison are all Hannibal Lecter, and they're not. He actually said this. You probably heard this. He said, did you see Shawshank Redemption? Look at Morgan Freeman. They're more like Morgan Freeman. Does anybody think Morgan Freeman should never have been let out of prison? This guy can't separate fiction, Hollywood, from reality. He just loves, for some strange reason, killers. He spent his career trying to get killers out of prison, Jack. And that has nothing to do with his stroke-driven brain damage, which he also has. What the hell Pennsylvanians were thinking in voting for this caveman, I don't understand. I'll never get that. You could give me 20 years of nonstop study of the voting in Pennsylvania. I'll never be able to understand that, figure that out.
Yeah, I don't get it either. I was trying to figure out, is there a way that Oz should have won that race, and might that have been it? The other thing I will say, looking at...
He was a Trump candidate. He was a terrible candidate, and Trump endorsed him, and nobody understood why. It absolutely should not have been him. McCormick should have been the nominee for the Republican Party, and McCormick would have been the nominee winning that primary if Trump hadn't endorsed Oz. That's one of the ones that I was talking about before when I said absolutely some of the luster came off of the Trump brand last night. Oz is an example of it.
Yeah. I think there was a similar reaction when Trump endorsed J.D. Vance. We heard that in Ohio. Do you remember?
Sure, I was one of them saying it.
Everybody was up in arms.
Really?
And, that turned out well.
You got a rock-ribbed conservative patriot like Mike Gibbons there, and you're going with the guy who called you, America's Hitler or whatever it was. And I was very, very anti-J.D. Vance during that primary season. Same as I was with Trump in 2016, but after each of them won the nomination, I jumped all in, and I said, let's look at this a little more closely.
I had a lot of people say to me, look, if J.D. Vance governs as a third as the way he talks, then he's going to be one of the most conservative senators.
Amen.
And so that the proof is in the pudding there. I think that's what people are waiting to see. The other person that Donald Trump endorsed in Ohio won big last night, Mike DeWine. But it's very interesting to point out, I talked with some people on his team. Well, first of all, they didn't talk about this, but when Trump introduced him at the rally the night before the election, he was booed very loudly, to the point that when Trump asked John Husted, hey, do you want to say a word? John's like, oh, I'm good, thanks. But, what drove
That's
that last
hysterical.
night?
I love that.
What drove that last night was Republicans came home because Republicans went, hey, Nan Whaley is crazy. I'm not going to vote for Nan Whaley. And even the people who were pissed off about being locked down. Now, the people who are happy about being locked down also voted for DeWine. Some of the independents and the softies voted for Mike DeWine. So I think that's why his margin was where it was. He was the beneficiary of all things last night, essentially.
I don't want to talk too much about the governor's race because it was never a race. The race was in the primary, and Mike DeWine courted Joe Blystone and his supporters and was a major factor in keeping Blystone in a race that he knew Blystone had to stay in order for him to win. If it had been one-on-one, mano-a-mano, DeWine against Renacci, without Bob Paduchek sticking his nose in it, endorsing,
Let's go there.
funding DeWine's campaign in the primary before the endorsement vote was held, then having the endorsement vote and whipping up the votes for Mike DeWine.
Wait. Are you saying are you insinuating that Bob Paduchek funded Joe Blystone or Joe or
He
Mike
funded
DeWine?
Mike DeWine.
Okay, I
he
got
funded
you.
Mike DeWine before there was actually an endorsement vote that would
Gotcha.
have sent ORP money to
And
Mike
Dave
DeWine.
Yost, by the way.
Right, that too, yes. But I'm saying he was on Blystone's ranch, and he was communicating and supporting Blystone to stay in this race
Yeah.
because he knew it was going to help.
So
him.
some of you who aren't familiar with that, Joe Blystone was depositioned a couple of weeks ago in a defamation case that he started against his former campaign co-manager there in Delaware County, and the judge made him sit for a deposition. It's about 93 pages. We're in the receipt of it. But one of the things that he pointed out, and I think Bob just alluded to it, was that prior to the primary election, that Bob Paduchek went down on the farm and had a discussion with Joe Blystone. And what did he say, Bob? Did you get to that?
I didn't. I can't quote it.
Okay.
But essentially, he encouraged him to keep on keeping on.
Should we pivot over to that big announcement today, or do you want to add something else?
Well, just to say, when I said I don't want to talk much about the governor's race, I will say this though: he's a weasel. Governor Mike DeWine is a weasel. He is, I believe, to be a fraud. I believe what he did to the people of Ohio, to the business owners of Ohio, to the employees of Ohio, to the students of Ohio in the COVID period was indefensible, irredeemable, and I will loathe him for the rest of my time on earth or his, whichever one ends first. I did not vote for him. I can sleep better tonight knowing that the governor, that I despise, did not get there because of anything I did. He did get there the first time because of something I did. I voted for him. I was not going to do that again. So I'm not going to talk about him. I'm going to watch and see what happens. I'm going to critique that which needs criticism. I am going to praise that which needs praise. I don't anticipate very much of that. But Mike DeWine won, and I'm glad the Democrat didn't win, and that's where I want to leave that. That's about the extent of what I want to talk about with the governor's race. The time to talk about that governor's race was in May, when we needed to make sure he did not win the primary. And now we can talk about the guy who helped make sure he did, Bob Paduchek. You got
Yeah.
the news? Go ahead.
Yeah, so a couple of things. First of all, scuttlebutt is that there may be legislation in this new General Assembly that would fix that would require a majority to carry the nomination. So that would be interesting, as
That
well
would
as
be very
closed
interesting.
primaries.
Closed primaries is key as well, because
Right.
Democrats crossed over and made sure, and I'll never forget, I think it was in the Daily Beast, that said, Ohio Democrats, you don't have much on your ballot in the primary. Take a Republican ballot because it's an open primary and vote for, he said, they said two things. Vote for Dolan in the Senate race and vote for Mike DeWine, because they are the most like us. They are the most like us, the most liberal, the most Democrat, or whatever that we can deal with if we have to over the next few years.
Yeah, so just to recap real quick in layman's terms. So what they're saying is that in order to win the primary nomination, you have to have 50% of the vote, not 38%, right? So, and if not, there's a runoff. The other thing is, if you're a Republican, you vote in the Republican primary. If you're a Democrat, you vote in the Democrat primary. And the reason being is that, there were some stories written after the primary that we don't know what the number is, but it was six figures that crossed over and voted for Mike DeWine, and definitely, inflated his numbers in that primary race. And of course, he won going away. But
Weren't the numbers like something like 800,000 registered Republicans in the primary, and yet there were like 1.2 million votes cast?
You got it.
in the governor's race.
Yeah, and
So-
so we broke down some of the files from the RNC and looked at things, and it appeared that there was crossover. So I will leave it at that. But so the announcement today is that Bob Paduchek, chairman of the Ohio Republican Party, announced that he will not seek re-election in January. So that post will be open. I will pause there because I know that you're itching to say something about that, Bob.
It's probably the same thing you're going to say. You know, Bob Paduchik, I think, acted like a mafioso Don in charge of the ORP. I think he was bad for Republicans. I think he's bad for the party. I think what he did for Mike DeWine, as we talked about a few minutes ago, should be criminal. I think he hid from any negative or critical press, including you, booted you from that endorsement meeting before it even began, wouldn't even let you come.
Guess who the first person was that I saw last night when I strolled down to the Renaissance in downtown Columbus?
I'm going to guess Bob Paduchik.
Bob Paduchik.
How about that?
And I shook his hand and asked him if he could chat, and he said, no, I'm busy. But he did open the door for me. Okay.
But he called you not a real journalist, said the Ohio Press Network is not real news, or fake news, or whatever it was. He wouldn't come on with me. Just an absolute cowardly guy who led this thing, and his decision to step down. He said it's time for new leadership. Mm-hmm. And he's trying to make himself sound magnanimous. He's trying to make himself sound like he's willing to step aside for the betterment and the growth and the expansion and the new ideas of other people in the party. When the reality is, we just had the State Central Committee votes in August, and the State Central Committee flipped over, and he knew he was getting ousted. They should have already had the vote at the last meeting.
Yeah, there was a lot of Robert's Rules of Order, dickering and back and forth, and he survived the oust.
Yeah, he survived that, but he knew that the votes are there now in the new State Central Committee, makeup to boot him, and he didn't want to be voted out, so he decided to step down ahead of time to make himself look good. And the question is now where does he go?
So a couple of things I want to add, and you're going to probably fall out of your chair. I think Bob Paduchik's a very smart man. I think Bob Paduchik is very strategic, and I think that as a political operative, he's a genius. But when you're working with a team of 66 elected people, and you're not taking their input, and you're bad-mouthing them, and you're painting people who have questions and who are maybe detractors as the enemy of the Republican Party, I think that's hogwash, and I think that perturbed a lot of people. I can put my personal stuff aside.
There are a lot of evil people in politics, Jack, who are super smart. It's never been a question about his wisdom or his strategic skills. He is very smart. He's very strategic, but he is also not a good man. He is not in it, in my estimation, for the betterment of the party and thus the citizenry, the constituency of the state of Ohio. He's in it for his own personal power.
Well, if you go to the Ohio Press Network website, and by the way, I'm in my personal capacity here, not as editor-in-chief there, but we did publish a story on that today, and on one of the links, you can go to the story. You can read the letter that he wrote. I'm going to bring this around the barn pretty quickly, but in that letter, he touts what he did. Basically against opposition, right? And he calls out some of the people, again, who opposed him. And interestingly enough, what I perceived that letter as his final stamp, here's what I did, and here's the messaging that I want you to have as I exit. But the other thing that I think that he's setting up for, and I'm going to answer your question from earlier here, and giving you one tidbit of information first. What I think he's doing is I think he's setting up for his predecessor, which I'm hearing might be Keith Cheney. But I also believe that there are going to be some proxies for those gubernatorial candidates that didn't win the election, and so hopefully there is a very robust series of discussions on who the next chairman or chairwoman will be. But to answer your question, I think Bob Paduchik is going to jump on the Trump train. I think he will announce it next week, and I think if it's not final, it will be final next week. And I think that he will probably take some other people from campaigns that just worked on campaigns in Ohio and join Trump for the 24 effort.
Yeah, I think you're right. Trump, to my shock and disgust back in 21 when he came to Wellington for the big rally there in 2021, praised Bob Paduchik in front of that crowd. And I was blown away because, again, of what Bob Paduchik was doing to the party and what he was doing to, for Mike DeWine. And I think in violation of ORP rules and bylaws, it's just I don't trust the man. And I quite frankly, it doesn't surprise me that Donald Trump might bring him on board, because the one criticism I have had of Donald Trump as a leader and when he was the president was his judgment of character.
Mm-hmm.
How many mistakes did he make in appointments to cabinet level positions, to other very high ranking positions? How many of those did he have to fix after he made his initial choice? He had to replace some of them 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Including, by the way, he regrets naming Christopher Wray. He makes some decisions on people that he puts in prime positions that he regrets later on because he doesn't vet them thoroughly. And if he brings Bob Paduchik on, I think that would be another example of that.
Well, you think that he would read between the lines. I've heard him introduce Bob Paduchik 3 times on the stage in Ohio in the last year and a half, and he's been met with groans and boos.
Yes.
Just like Mike DeWine.
Yeah, just
but
like Mike
at the
DeWine.
end of the day, I think Donald Trump goes, hey, this is the thing I want to get done. Can this guy get it done for me? But I'm going to add one more point, and this is going in the weeds, but it's important to say, the challenge that Donald Trump has, that anybody has at the state level or particularly as president of the United States, it doesn't matter who you appoint. You have staffers in their 20 or 30s that go to these crazy liberal universities who are writing all the positions and briefing all of these folks, and it's a massive administrative state that we need to understand and we need to gut at some point.
Yeah, I agree with that. Jack, let's get some of these questions and comments in. And what do you say we just, we're making this up on the fly.
Let's do it.
For those who don't know, let's just go back and forth. I'll ask you one of them, and
Yep.
you ask me one of them, and
Yep.
we'll just rifle through these as quickly as we can in the, 8, 9, 10 minutes or whatever we have left.
Yep.
All right. Debbie asks how write-in votes are counted. Do you know?
Yeah, it's a great question. They are counted, and they have to match exactly as they are on the ballot. I know.
I know
If
they're
you're
not
using
counted
the
on election
machines-
night. They're not counted like last night. None of them
The
were gonna
zero
show up.
are
They were all
registered, so
gonna
they
show
will
zero.
go back and they will look. And if the question behind the question is are there enough votes? No, there are not.
Right.
So
Okay.
that's the answer there. So Wade German asks, should Trump run in 24 or should it be another guy or woman?
Yeah, and you know what? I think he would just be such a phenomenal kingmaker if he would accept that role. If he made his big announcement at Mar-a-Lago on the 15th, and instead of saying I'm running for president in 2024, if he said I'm here in Florida, the state that is being run by the best governor in this country, Ron DeSantis, and I support him for the next Republican nominee for president if he so chooses it, I would be a very happy man, and I think the party would be better for it. But yes, he's going to run.
Yeah, and I think John Fetterman would speak clearly, and Joe Biden would be clear-minded. I think those are the odds we're looking at. There.
That is well said. Okay, Debbie says, do you really think Republicans will do anything this time, or is it just lip service?
Statewide and nationally, let me answer that really, really quickly. You're going to get 4 years of Mike DeWine, and you're going to get 4 years of unfettered Mike DeWine. I don't think that it's an accident that he didn't weigh in on the State Board of Education stuff. I think that was the part, by the way, that the Republican Party missed. The state Republican Party had a chance to weigh in on Brandon Shea's resolution that talked about parents' rights and protecting our girls in schools. And DeWine didn't weigh in. Yost wrote a letter, but was extremely quiet about it. And
But he wrote a letter to the Federal Department of Education. He
Which
did
is-
not send it to the state board members to tell them,
hey.
this is where the position of the Ohio Attorney General is.
Yeah, and if you're not going to listen to the Attorney General, what attorney are you listening to in a state office? And so you had at least 2 Democrats, maybe 4, elected last night in a 5-member, re-up on the state school board. So I think that is going to be a big miss. I think Mike DeWine is a little more liberal in his education policy. So there won't be lip service there. I just think that we're going to see things change. The other thing I'm going to point out real quick before I forget, Bob, I don't think that we will see Mike DeWine fulfill a 4-year term. I think Mike DeWine retires. I think John Husted sits in that chair. I think that's the only chance John Husted has winning a race as governor is if he has some time in the chair.
And then becomes an incumbent.
You got it. And then runs as the incumbent.
I suspect that the question was probably more about the federal, the House. Now that we're going to take the House, will we do anything with it or just lip service? So I think they probably want to know about the national side.
Well, look, here's two key things there. Republicans and Democrats are both addicted to spending. You can't fix something unless you call it what it is. And that's what it is. Both parties are addicted to spending. So am I completely optimistic? No. But if you have a small majority, and I don't know if Jim Jordan said this on your program today, if you have a small majority, then coalitions matter. And I think with the majority being as small as it might be, not as robust as people would have liked, I think the Freedom Caucus becomes a really strong voter bloc. to get things done. You're 30 or 40 people there that can make things happen or stop things from happening.
I'll answer it this way. I guarantee you there's going to be oversight. I don't know about necessarily on the spending side of things, but I guarantee you they are going to investigate Dr. Fauci. They are going to investigate the entire relationship between the National Institute of Health, the CDC, and the big pharmaceutical companies that they used to mandate these shots for people. Mm-hmm. I guarantee you they're going to investigate that. I guarantee they're going to investigate Merrick Garland and the DOJ for their targeting of parents who come to school board meetings, for their targeting of Christians who sing hymns outside of abortion clinics, but not targeting people who firebomb pregnancy centers. Mm-hmm. You know, everything, the weaponization of I guarantee you they will move very, very quickly to try to kill the portion of the bill that was passed that hires 87,000 new IRS agents to crawl up the asses of millions of Americans in an attempt to pay for the rest of Biden's climate change boondoggle crap. Mm-hmm. That's the one thing. I don't know about the spending, and I don't know exactly about what other legislation they're going to be able to get done, especially if it's a mixed bag and then it's going to be vetoed because they want to veto power or overriding power over Biden. I don't know how much they'll get done from a legislative side or a spending side, but I promise you from an investigative and oversight side of things, they're going to do a lot.
I want to address Patty Klein said the ORP did put out a statement supporting Yost's letter. I will apologize and I will retract that statement if it's true. My understanding is that certain state central committee members put out a letter to Bob Paduchek, the chairman, and said, we want to call a special meeting. We want to pass a resolution. My understanding is that Paduchek said, well, look, in order to do that, we need X number of people to get on board with it. They almost immediately got that number, and then they said, well, wait a minute, no, we need like handwritten signature, da-da-da-da-da. So they did that, and then my understanding was they were going to call a special meeting within 14 days to discuss it and then pass a resolution. So the folks who came out against that were actually state central committee members, primarily those folks who were newly elected, and I don't think that Bob Paduchek got off the snide on that. So I could be wrong about that, but I don't think I am. I will look into it.
This says J.R. Majewski is in the chat. I thought people were talking about J.R. Majewski. He's in the chat. Does he have a question? Or did he make a comment?
Yeah, he made several comments. I read a couple of them. Maybe
I misunderstood.
Maybe I glossed over those.
I thought they said people were talking about J.R. Majewski. This says J.R. is in it. Like I said, I can't read it firsthand here. I'm relying on Bruce here. What do you
he
got?
said Madison got $3 million. He got zero from the party. And he said it was an R3. We got that right. So it was an R3, and he got zero help down the stretch. I really believed that his race was winnable. Now, Shabbat, I wasn't so certain about because it carved out certain parts of Cincinnati. But interestingly enough, some judges in that area were elected Republican. I think Shabbat's, death knell was the fact that he's been in office a long time. Right. And I think Landsman is probably...
You got to answer the one about the Majewski question a little bit. In fact, we'll wrap here because we're up in an hour now. That was one of the first things we talked about. You and I disagreed. I thought that was never going to be a competitive race, and you thought there was. Explain why. And again, I say this, and if JR is still in the chat or still watching us, JR Majewski, you know I interviewed you. I absolutely supported your campaign every step of the way, and I thought he was absolutely the right man for the job. Mm-hmm. But in my... taking out my partisanship or my belief or my support, looking at it completely objectively from the outside, it's not JR. It's anybody going against Marcy Kaptur is going to be climbing a mountain, like I said, with a bag of bricks on their back because of her name recognition, the length of time she's been there. There are so many Democrats in her districts, even through redrawn districts, that just say automatically they see Marcy Kaptur's name, check. You could have Jesus Christ on the other side, much less J.R. Majewski, and they're going to vote for Marcy Kaptur. I just feel like it was never in the cards, although I salute him and anybody who's willing to take that run at her. Why did you think that was such a possible win?
I'm going to try to answer this very quickly because I think more than anything, and if I didn't say this earlier, I meant to, and I'm going to say it again, so pardon me if it's a repeat. Elections today, I think, count more on the individual and less on the party. Now, all things being equal, right? Like there are some people who are not going to vote this way and others that aren't going to vote that way. But I think we're in a time where each individual race matters and each person matters more than in the past. Why? Because I think during COVID, people went, wait a minute, this guy's a rhino. I thought I voted for a conservative, right? And I think some Democrats are going now, this is a communist, right? I wanted some things different, but I didn't want this. And so I think people are looking at each individual race. That's why I think it's a little bit tricky sometimes to go, well, Trump endorsed this person and they won, and not this person and this person won. And so here's why I think it's winnable. I think what resonates with voters is what wins. And there was a state Senate race in the city of Columbus, last night that the incumbent was a Democrat, and Michelle Reynolds was the newcomer, and she's a black woman who is conservative, and she calls it like it is in Columbus, and she won. And she won by a decent margin because her message resonated and people paid attention to what she was doing. I think JR's message was resonating. I think that Marcy is part of that old guard that is tax and spend and that is platitudes, and I think he had momentum. I genuinely believe if he didn't, Captor wouldn't have done what she did with the Associated Press and those bogus stories. And I think it had a little bit of an impact, and I think the
difference
funding being
between
cut.
the Columbus story that you just told and this one is the opponent of Kim Reynolds, you said? Was it?
Michelle Reynolds.
Michelle Reynolds.
Yep.
The opponent
She's gonna be a rock
Marcy
star, by
Kaptur.
the way.
Wasn't in her seat for 30 years, where you're just entrenched. It's like Patty
Fair.
Murray in Washington. You know, Patty Murray, Smiley, absolutely. Tiffany Smiley, was that her name? The candidate up there. Absolutely had way better ideas, but Patty Murray's been there now. This is like, for 20-some years.
And wasn't she just recently reelected, too?
Yes.
So it wasn't like there was a great deal of time to move the needle forward.
There are some individuals that are just so entrenched in their districts or in their Senate seats, they're going to stay there until they decide not to run again. And I think it's one of them. I think Marcy Kaptur is one of them. She has fended off challenges from so many people who are much better than her, and Jared Majewski is one of them, who is better than her, who has better ideas, who could do more for the district, that is not just part of the old guard tax and spend leftists and so on and so forth, but her status there is just entrenched, and I don't think the day she leaves D.C. is when she says, I'm done, not when she's beaten.
I want to answer this question. I know we're over on time. But Patty Klein asked, will the investigations lead to accountability, though? I had some conversations with Warren Davidson, with Jim Jordan, and I don't think that you're going to get the resolve that you want. I don't think that you're going to see Anthony Fauci in prison. I know some of you have said that. I don't think that you're going to see bad, nasty things happen to Christopher Wray. I think what you will see is if there is something that it has criminal culpability to it, it can get turned over for further investigation and perhaps prosecution. But what I think can happen is people can lose jobs, people can lose funding, and I think that's what you're going to see. I think in some of these instances that might be the best outcome.
We're not going to see leg irons on most of these people, or probably any of these people. And that's a pipe dream. The left wants them for Donald Trump, for the the files, classified documents, and so forth. No, they're not going to prison, but the NIH may lose a ton of funding. They are definitely going to be reformatted if they do this right. They're going to change the way they do things. They're going to change the way oversight is conducted of the NIH. If the NIH was funding, gain-of-function research in Wuhan, China, they're going to do the same thing with the CDC. They're going to do the same thing with the FDA. The FDA gave emergency use authorization to these drugs, these experimental mRNA drugs that are not vaccines, and if the truth comes out about the number of adverse events, meaning sicknesses and physical permanent disabilities, the palsies, the myocarditis, the pericarditis, all of these things, and deaths. There is going to be hell to pay. We won't even see the investigations happen if we don't have the Republican majority in the House. So the fact that they will run the committees, there will be investigations of those things. So quote-unquote accountability, to Patty's point, is it won't lead to arrests. You're right. The orange jumpsuit is not reality. But changing the way all of those things are run is definitely a possibility if the investigations turn up the information that they think they will. So.
Yeah, well said.
All right, that's it. We've been talking smack, political smack, on episode 3. Don't forget, we're going to do this. I want to make this announcement now because it's a Wednesday right now. We're doing these live for Facebook Live so we can answer questions like this, but we're going to upload those to podcast form. They're going to be on podcast forms, hopefully platforms sooner rather than later, and we're going to do it twice a week live. Now, we did it Monday and Wednesday this week so that it would bookend the election yesterday. But we're going to normally be a Monday, Thursday podcast thing, right? That's what we decided. Monday, Thursday, 7 p.m. on Facebook Live. We're going to expand it to Rumble Live as we get a little bit more capacity. And then we're going to, again, start uploading these so you can watch them at your leisure on whatever or listen on whatever podcast platform that you like and that you choose. So the next time we will have a live stream for this will be Monday, 7 o'clock.
You got it.
And we'll be back to talking smack. I'm Bob.
And I'm Jack.
That's why we do it right here. Don't forget what I said at the beginning. Don't forget what Rocky Balboa said. It's not how hard you can hit. It's how hard. Oh, yeah, the sponsor. Yeah, let's do that. I'm closing with my teeth gritted and doing the Rocky thing, and we got to do the sponsor. Jack Windsor.
We have a referee's medical timeout. Keep going, Bob. You keep going.
Well, just what I said at the beginning of the broadcast, we played that clip for you. We should play it again going out, actually. Can you play it again going? I don't know if anybody could hear it. I could barely hear it in my ears. If we can make it loud enough for people to hear it, let's do that.
Before you do
the
that,
sponsor,
let me
and
say
we'll close with that. Yeah.
Today's episode 3 is sponsored by the Freedom Foundation. The Freedom Foundation is the creator of optouttoday.com, the #1 tool to free government employees from union bondage. So go over to freedomfoundation.com to learn more. And if you make a 501c3 tax-deductible donation and you put in the subject line, Talking Smack, they'll double it.
Love that. Thank you so much to our sponsor. So with that, let's wrap this one with the words of Rocky Balboa. We took some hits last night, but it's not about getting hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it.
We got to figure out where to connect this.
You, me, or nobody is going to hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward.
It's a little louder.
That's how winning is done.
That's louder. Based on where this is level, I should be going like this. It's still like a very low.
Now, if you know what you're worth, now go out and get what you're worth. But you got to be willing to take the hits. And not pointing fingers saying you ain't where you want to be because of him or her or anybody. Cowards do that, and that ain't you. You're better than that.
Is this still playing?